Hi there, Randy Green here, podcast 2. So the dual journey or the double journey through the zodiac, and I am reading up a little bit here. I have explained the ideas of the Alice Bailey material esoteric astrology, and I got ChatGPT to kind of put it into an overview that I can work from instead of me having to look it all up and write it all down. It's in my head, so I just primed ChatGPT to put it out there. I know what I'm talking about. I've been working with it many years. I had a whole process with esoteric astrology, read my way through, work with it myself, see if it worked. And in many ways, it's not the go-to level of information, but it has a good framework, and I'm just using the framework here. What we understand, we have kind of the lower, the egoic, as Alice Bailey calls it, but that's a bad word. It's easier when you read it. It's difficult to say. So the ego structure, that's the interface we have with our everyday human psychology, our version of ourselves inside this reality. As you are now, the one you were born, the one you have become, the different processes through what you have adapted into, as we talk about in the text material. So that's who you are now, the name you have now, the address, the age, the self-identification of who and what you are in this reality, in this world, wherever you are in this world. That's you, that's your ego, that's who you see yourself to be. If you go to a dinner and someone asks, what do you do for work? And you begin to talk from a different level, that's you, that's your ego structure. Okay, so when we talk about the core self, then it's different. And Bailey works with this idea of that you first walk through the 12 houses of the astrology chart, the 12 houses of the zodiac, where you are unfolding through the wheel of incarnation all the aspects of what it means to be human until you have lifted up all of the levels of what it means to be human inside this reality, from where you can step out of the base program. You become the best version of a human you can be. And that's part of the transition sciences as well. There we just call it the clearing of the emotional field and the mental field of our belief systems and past lives and subconscious material, all of these things which I have talked about, the psyche as energy, the psyche as processes, and keeping the psychic energetic balance and the transformative energy system. And in the entire structure of the free course material is all about how to transform the lower self, the ego structure, and release itself from the base program. But it goes through different stages, and there are built into the enslavement chart to this reality that keeps us stuck in the incarnational cycles, that the human experience that we are having in each life is tailored in a specific way to keep us in the reincarnation cycle. It is tailored keep us stuck, to keep us reincarnating. So we have to be smart and say, okay, the human experience is not a learning lesson that is working for me to teach me how to release myself. It's a reality program that works against me to keep me stuck in the reincarnation cycle. That's the first step. And some will say, well, and then you go into victimization and sadness and all of these kind of things. But we have known from the text, as you have also learned, it's all about psychodynamics. It's about trauma, core wounds. It's about learning to deal with energetic patterns and do the clearing work, do psychotherapy if you need to. We go into that a little bit later. And then you can turn that wheel around. In the Bailey material, it goes with, and I go that way too, you need to master the everyday life before you can let it go. You can't just let it go before you have completed the program. Unfortunately, it's like a maze. Until you've completed it, you see through it, you know how to observe it, you know how to deal with it, you're stuck in it. And the Buddhist teachings tells us that as well, due to that their solution is meditation, contemplation, mindfulness, and understanding how words, thoughts, and everything you do matters that keeps you entangled. So the idea is the same. Okay, so there are two primary ways to traversing the zodiac. So we have 12 signs, each one of this portal of energy that constitutes and contributes to both the personality, what we could call the ego structure, as well as the core self dynamics, in that way that, very important, the core selves do not align with the zodiac as we know of it. It actually aligns with the original 12 lineages. But that's kind of what called core self, a multidimensional astrology that I have not been able to tap into, because that's some of the teachings of the Celts. That's a branch of Syrian Syrian Bs that became part of that population we know as the Celts, but not the ones that came from the Mediterranean, but the original ones that existed in England long before the later Celts came from the black-haired, migrated from the Mediterranean area and up to England and built the Stonehenge and all of these kind of things. But we're talking about civilizations prior to that, earlier than that doesn't exist anymore. Similarly, they are connected to what's called Avalon. But that's a whole other level of English history we're not going into here, because that's littered with distortion as well. As part of my past life as a Buddhist monk in Tibet, I've worked with the cycles of the reincarnation principles and how different, and I'm here struggling. So if sometimes I say soul, just bear with me, just understand now, it's just sometimes it's just easier. But the portion of us that reincarnates, how can that be released? And that's the quote unquote higher octave of the Bailey teaching. So we have the lower octave, the human that we are, then the higher octave are the psychodynamics of that part of us that are stuck inside this reality that needs to undergo certain transformations to be able to integrate into the lower self or the lower octave or the lower human or the personality. That's the holographic energetic template. But that's the first level. Then once we move beyond that, we get into a holographic energetic template where we work with a multidimensional step. So technically, the holographic energetic template is what the ancient teachings associate with spirit, whereas the transformative energy system, as we talked about in the whole academy courses, is what people associate with the soul. And the lower structure of the personality is what we are in this life. So now you've got the Trinity structure there as well. So the holographic energetic template is the spirit. That's the highest level. That's our multidimensional consciousness levels with the constellations, the configurations of multidimensionality. That's part of a holographic energetic template that can span worlds and cosmic journeys beyond this universe. Then we have the soul, that is the aspect that is called the transformative energy system, where certain types of energies must be seated in that are in alignment with the lower self. And that's the way we're working with it here. So we are adding on a new way of working with the same structures we've already worked with in the transition sciences. But this is good because we're working with, we could say the transition sciences teaches you all about the soul as it works inside this reality as part of its clearing processes that allows it to disconnect from the incarnational cycles. That's the higher octave of the zodiac in esoteric astrology, and then the lower self. And here we are working mainly with the lower self that now understands all of this, but I needed to find a tool that kind of gets us into everyday life. And this is why I'm doing this journey through the zodiac as a framework from where we can get some psychodynamics that is on a general level. You see, when we talk psychodynamics, to really work with your psychological structure and what you need to work with, I need to work with you as a person because it's individual. We can't really take a meta structure or meta structure and say, oh, this applies to all. But that's why I'm using the Bailey material here, so I have a framework. But the individual level, the true understanding of who and what you are, must be done in individual work. It can't be made into something generic. You are sovereignly you. And everything you are ties to your history, your past life, your experiences, your configuration, everything you are going back to the lineage. So that way, if I ever were to pick up astrology, then it had to be individualized again and could not be worked with generically as we're doing it here. So I hope you understand why I'm doing this. So you're not beginning to identify yourself with, say, oh, this is the true teaching. No, this is just a tool. This is a tool. Okay, so we're now doing the dual journey between the lower octave and the higher octave. And the lower octave is the human self inside this reality, what you are now, how you perceive yourself to be, the atta. And then you have the higher octave, that is the psychodynamics of the transformative processes that leads you to the understanding of how to work with that, what we could say, emotional, mental level of your constitution, your energy system as you are now, that ties into past lives, that ties into the incarnational cycles, that ties into incarnation and rebirth, that keeps you stuck here. And these dynamics needs to be worked with. Then from that, you go into the fourth dimension and you begin to work with the extraterrestrial technology. So that higher octave is part of the astral mental plane, that are part of the collective. That's what we call the second dimension, if you like. That's where we call the distortion fields, where you need some kind of guiding principle through the desert, as it's called, through the wilderness, so that you can get out to the other side. And then, of course, you tap into the colonial programs and whatnot, and the extraterrestrial agenda, etc., of whatever's left, which is now just technology, a few grays and a little bit of insectoids, but the rest of it is more or less gone. Okay, so again, this is complex information, and if you've experienced it, it will make complete sense. If you have not, then it's a lot of information to take in. So I suggest you, after each podcast, you sit down and say, what was the most important thing for me here, the takeaway from me that aligns and resonates with what I want to work with. And then you sit in meditation and contemplate on it. Make it a simple question you contemplate on. As in, when you listen to this podcast or the other one, you sit down in contemplation afterwards. You go into deep meditation and you relax and you breathe. And then you ask your question, what is the takeaway from me in this podcast? What is most important for me to work with right now? And I suggest you keep listening, go back and listen again, and then you ask the question again until you kind of feel, okay, now I got it. Now it's kind of become something that makes sense to me. I understand it now, so you can let it go. The whole purpose is to understand so you can let it go. That's part of the integration process. And you integrate this complex information so that you can build a holographic structure inside your emotional mental field that allows for the more complex structures of your holographic energetic template to descend into the emotional mental field. Because that's part of selfhood, where we then begin to, that's the ahat, where we really begin to understand and master the different levels of our being, the lower octave, the higher octave, and the holographic energetic energy system. So there are two ways that you are walking through the zodiac. There is the clockwise. That's the lower octave. That's the reincarnational cycle. And that's the personality of the ego that goes from ignorance and separation, as in being cloaked in the distortion, completely in oblivion, and no longer connected to the higher octave or the transformative energy system, no longer connected whatsoever. And that's called the path of involution. And that means you literally, everything you do just get you more and more entangled like a fly in a spider's web. So that's karma, the karma path. And that's the negative karma, the karma that keeps you stuck in the incarnational cycle, where the transformative energy system is so cloaked in matter and is so forgotten by the ego structure that there is so high a degree of distortion that everything you do and think and feel creates negative distortion energy, aka karma, negative karma, and it goes into kind of what we call distortion or out of sync, or as it's called in the Buddhist teachings, dukkha, or suffering, where everything we do leads to nothing. It just leads to more disharmony. It just leads to more frustration. It just leads to more discontent. So in a way, there are little patches of joy and patches of experiences that we kind of appreciate. And the whole journey there is to learn to see things as they truly are, to work with them, to transform them so they no longer become an issue that keeps popping up. So we have to quote unquote learn from, that keeps pushing us back into the wheel of incarnation. That's becoming the best version of a human we can be. And there are so many teachings that tells us both morally, ethically, in all sorts of different ways, how to become that better human. I would rely on psychotherapy, meditation, inner work, clearing work, self-healing, mindfulness practices, observance, going with the understanding of envisioning what kind of human do I want to be? What's the best version of a human I can be? What does that mean to me? How would I like to be treated? And if everybody was doing what I was doing, how would the world look? It's pretty simple. For me, it's not that difficult. But that's because I have remnants of past lives, remembering them when I was born into this life. So practices of that is already in me. I kind of was born that way, observing reality and others from outside and saying, what are these weird, oblivious vessels, shells that are walking around doing everything that they don't want to do and hurt each other? And what's going on here? Why am I born here? So in that way, it's the normal human experience is difficult to get out because it's now so convoluted in all sorts of distortions that people don't even know right from wrong anymore. It's like it's becoming every day to lie and cheat and deceive and whatever. And all of these foundational basic levels of what it means to be a good human must be trained. And then it goes into the interpersonal relationships and how we act around other people. And then eventually it goes into the whole planetary setting. We've talked about that, and there the principles and the rules, as we talked about in the free course material, becomes a really good guideline in how to actually become the best version of a human. So I touched ground with that as well in the transition sciences. So you can go there, and if you've forgotten it, then do a re-listening to this so you kind of remember, oh yeah, now I get it. That's what it is. I use the principles as a guideline to figure out how to become the best version of a human we can be, to lead us into the ability where we actually break through and master the base program. And there we can go counterclockwise into the higher octave where we begin to work with the transformative energy system. So once the human has reached a certain level of awakening, and in the Balaam material is typically the third initiation, but we don't need to go into that. But that is what's talked about in mastering the base program, where you have the first and second initiation are actually just mastering the physical level and the emotional level. The third initiation is where you begin to really master the cleansing and the distortion energies and how to do that. But we don't need to go there because this is part of a system that no longer is there. It's a program. So we don't do the initiation program. We don't need to do that. I have walked my way through it and I understand the initiation. I also read about it in the Balaam material, but it never rung true, even though they were trying, the CRNAs were trying very hard to get me on board on that one. But once you have become kind of completed the incarnational cycles within the colonial programs, the wheel reverses. And that means you can now begin to work with your transformative energy system. And that means instead of going through the houses clockwise, you now go through the houses counterclockwise. And that's the Bailey method. I'm not saying this is the method that we should do. And this is a part of evolution. And that means that where the individual begins to consciously cooperate, work with the transformative energy system and the holographic energetic energy system and the true purpose of our blueprint, where the consciousness units can be expressed inside this physical form. So the lower cycle, as we are purifying ourselves and get out of the entanglement, are part of the personality. These lessons are all about survival, identity, desire, and mastery of form, and our emotional and mental field, the three lower fields. And then the higher cycles are all about the transformative energy system and of how we need to work to that type of disentanglement that leads us to the path of liberation. And the path of liberation itself is the subsidiary timeline. So now you begin to see why I can use this. So I will first work with Leo and the star sign Leo. I will go eventually at the end of this. I will talk through all 12 constellations or star signs, how they work. But I want to work with Leo first because Leo is the fifth sign of the zodiac and it plays a very important role in the individual consciousness and the transformative energy system or the awareness of the core self. Leo is the sign for that. And in Bailey's framework, it is the esoteric ruler. That means the outer ruler, the everyday human ruler is the sun. And that's it shows the vital core, self-expression, and personality structure. So in a way, personality itself is symbolized by Leo. And no, don't go into all sorts of layman's astrology or the personality traits of Leo and whatnot, because you can't really use that. There are some dynamics, but they are not completely fitting. It's like the Enneagram. It's like all of these different ways that we kind of, the crab is like this, or Leo is like this, or Capricorn is like that, or whatever. And there are some similarities, but when we talk about energy, it actually is it's more conducive to work with the constellations as 3 octaves of Earth, where you have Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. 3 aspects or 3 octaves of air, where you have the twins or Gemini, and you have, bear with me, Libra, and then you have the top one, which is Aquarius. And then you have 3 octaves of water, which is the crab, which is Scorpio, and then the Pisces. And then you have 3 octaves of fire, which is the Aries, which is Leo, and which is Sagittarius. And these 3 octaves of the elements are associated with different types of subtle energies, and they have an impact on our emotional field and our mental field and our biofield. So instead of working with the constellations as personality traits, work with them as different octaves of the elements. And there you will see a much more, what we could say, conducive way of working with it. So we could say the sun as a fire energy here in the lowest octave works as kind of self-expression and the personality, the foundation of it. So when we work with the fire energy as a transformative of the personality structure, then we work with self-expression. That's psychology, but it's also the sun that goes in and makes it vital, that pushes it in, that amplifies it. The esoteric ruler is what we say, that's also the sun, but that's the dynamics of the transformative energy system that now becomes the transmitter of the transformative energy system dynamics, as you know from the transition sciences. And it indicates a kind of an energy that works to unify the lower and the higher versions of ourselves. The transformative energy system begins to push its way through the heart into the lower energy system. And here it's often associated with the ray 1, that's will and power, and ray 5, that is concrete knowledge, and that's what I call the higher order sciences. So you have this where the connectivity to the transformative system and transformative energy system has become so strong that it becomes a will and a power that pushes you to keep breaking down what is no longer of use. You literally, like the sun through a glass, burns away everything that's no longer of use, and you use the higher order sciences to do so. So Leo on the lower octave, as in kind of the personality, is in the clockwise path. It builds and strengthens the sense of self, and it develops individuality and self-awareness. It explores creativity, leadership, and will, and it's experiencing the illusion of being separate from the entirety, thinking, I'm the only thing that exists. That's the personality. It's kind of, I'm the most important person in the whole world. I am the center, as it's said with that idea. And it's cultivating personal pride and identity, often leading to ego inflation. So on its lower octave, Leo is necessary to create a core function and interface system inside this reality, but it's also there where the higher order transformative energy system kicks in and begin to transform us. So the Leo is both what we say the physical animalistic human as we're seeing it in the Sphinx, but at the same time it's also guarding the higher octave of the soul journey, which we're seeing in the 3 pyramids. So if you understand that old Egyptian complex as a journey of ascension, where you are transforming your entire being, and that's part of some of the ancient Egyptian rituals that are associated with that. So it plays a significant role. So on the higher octave, it's the transformative energy system. If we work through the constellation of Leo, if you have that star sign prominently in your chart, then but it also goes generically with all ego structures, that in the high order level, then that's the integration of the transformative energy system into your personality. And that's where it begins to be coordinated with the transformative energy system dynamics through the use of the principles. And it becomes the light of the transformative energy system, here said the light of the soul, that shines in and tells you, you need to get on the path of liberation. You need to do something else. You need to awaken and activate. And it becomes, in Leo, when we begin to work with the transformative energy system, done the reconfiguration, which is going counterclockwise, and we walk through the houses and have now integrated our transformative energy system, we become the conscious co-creator, as you're seeing in the energy construction work. And with that, true leadership emerges. And it's not based upon dominance, but it's on this whole ability to vibrate, to emit, to put out an influential field that leads to transformation and awakening in that way in other people, where you go in and just by your very being, you become an example of what it actually means to exist in this reality and what we're supposed to do. So it becomes, Leo is the fusion of, that's the integration where we transform the personality. So the whole point here is that first we walk the lower path. And that is all the stages of ego development, from Aries to Pisces as the human experience. And then there is the crisis point, which I also talked about. And that's often through suffering, awakening, or some inner revelation, which is, interestingly enough, often catalyzed in signs like Scorpio or Capricorn. For me, Capricorn for me it's the fifth house, but I got my moon there, so that's all about some of my childhood trauma that will then be pierced and brought up to the surface, just to put that in context. So there are different dynamics of our chart that can teach us about some of the psychodynamics we need to go through to get to that crisis point, and in which house, in what stage of our psychostructure that it will actually reveal itself. And once we got through what's often associated, as you know from the text, the dark night of the soul, then the wheel reverses. And then we become the seeker, the true, the technically in the tarot cards, we become the hermit. We go from stages 1 to 9 as in kind of in the major arcana, but the hermit is the one that really begins the full journey after going through the different stages, beginning with the Fool, of course. And each sign is transmuted. So you kind of see we go with what you have learned from the transition sciences. You go through this process of acknowledgement and transformation, and then you go into transmutation, and then you go into transcendence, as we have talked about. So if we go into these understandings, it's a good tool. I'm not here saying, read the book Esoteric Astrology, but we can use it. But for your convenience here and to end this podcast, I've gone through the 12 signs. I got ChatGPT to create a quick overview of the Esoteric Astrology book and how Alice A. Bailey puts it there. And these are some good ideas and narratives that we can contemplate upon. So it's for contemplation, it's for the energy of it, it's for the dynamic that it instigates and ignites within us. So Aries, the birth of identity, the first house. Lower octave, and that's the personality, the path of the human experience. Raw willpower, impulsiveness, egocentric drive, assertiveness, these are difficult words, right? Being assertive, being impulsive, and the survival instinct. And the key words there, the self-perception in Aries is I exist, I want, I do. And it's a fire. It's the lowest version of fire. It's this kind of raw fire that goes in and burns everything around itself, because my mom and sister are Aries, and I've had a lot of clashes with Aries, so I should know. And then the higher octave is where we go into the transformative processes that leads to transmutation, is where we get the transformative energy system. The will of that, the power of that kicks in. Initiate the highest spark of transformation. It goes in and illuminates, it goes in and enlightens, it goes in and becomes this inspired leadership in the Sagittarius. It leads the way. The old version of Sagittarius is this chimera, but it has an arrow, and you see it as an arrow. It points out and say, I set the direction. There are new cycles of the original willpower in this world. And their fire on this highest level in Aries, instead of being this, I burn everything around me, then in Aries, the highest octave of that one becomes, I come forth, and from that plane of mind, I rule. You become this wise knower of the fire energy in Aries, but it's still pretty, what we say in the first house, it's still pretty raw, it's still unrefined, it's still on the first octave, but you're still changing it. And from Aries, the low level of completely, I burn everything and crash and burn around me and create havoc, because that's a little bit how the Aries is. You see the horns, it just runs into everything, ram it down, and then it lifts up, and as it's said in the Bala material, it lifts his horn upwards, where it actually says, wow, I understand the power I have. And with that, I come forth. And from this plane of sovereignty, I rule, but I don't rule as egotistically, but I rule because I understand where my true power comes from. And that comes from the soul, so to speak. Taurus, or the bull, is the desire to possess an experience. And the lower octave in the human program is the attachment to material things, sensuality, inertia. It's stubborn. It's really hard to move. But it can also be very kind. We're just talking about the things that needs to be transformed here. That's important. We could call with Aries, there are lots of things that are positive to say that fire that comes in can inspire, etc., etc. But we're here talking about the things that needs to be transformed. We're not talking about all the positive aspects, even though that would be nice. You can read the esoteric teachings, the esoteric astrology if you want that. There are a lot of positivity there, of course. There are a lot of traits that makes a good person. These are things that needs to be transformed. We're looking at what must be transformed. So the Taurus in its space program egotistical manner is I have, I need. So you see, this is something that clings on to something. This is mine, my precious. And in that way, I need this, so I go for it. And then the bull puts in motion, and then it's impossible to stop. So you got to get that dynamic. But it's also an earth sign, so it's like a mudslide when the bull comes in and does whatever it does. Of course, mudslide is earth energy with water. But if we kind of go in and say, well, it's earth energy. It's very materialistic. It's very hard to move. And once it's there, and it doesn't really change anything. Like the bull, Ferdinand in Disney. Then it's the high octave of it that goes into illumination through experience, awakening of the inner eye, right use of resources in service. And that again goes with the bull that has downright horns, that goes to the soil, that goes to the lower level. That's technically the reversed pentagram. And then it rises up its horns, and then it becomes the third eye. And there's a reason why the Buddha is said to be born in Taurus, which is, I don't think is accurate, but there is a reason for that. And that's because the illumination through experience, the awakening of the inner eye, and the right use of resources and service. You can hear that's the Buddha in a nutshell. So that's why it's been associated with that. And it goes within I see. And when the eye is opened, all is light. And that's a good saying to contemplate upon, because it goes with the third eye, of course. And then you have Gemini. And that's the duality of mind and communication. Again, remember the 3 octaves of air energy, with Gemini as the base, Libra as the midpoint, and then the highest level of it in Aquarius. So in Gemini, in the normal human experience, we have superficial intellect, gossip, duality, restlessness, scattered mind, I think, I talk. And this is, in his worst case, ADHD. The free associating mind that doesn't know when to stop and where to go, just goes all over the place, and it's a mess. And connecting to people who have this structure of going everywhere all the time is complex, and it's tiring, and it's really just, okay, stop. Mindfulness practice, please. Learn when to speak, and learn when to think, and learn what's important. The higher octave of that is fusion of opposites, intuitive understanding, and the messenger of the soul. That's where the transformative energy system, the holographic teaching system, can begin to kick in. Synthesis through communication. That's where, when you, instead of just blah, 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 idle chatter, you begin to, the reason why I communicate is because I want to build bridges, because I want to create an environment where we both grow. Then whatever you say makes sense. It becomes important. It's an emission of ideas and energy that actually transforms. So that's the highest level of the Gemini energy, the duality of communication. And when that happens, then the Gemini energy becomes, I recognize my other self, and in the releasing of that self, I grow and glow. And that's mean where you really begin to understand your throat chakra, the power of your authentic self, that then begins to align with the transformative energy system. Then you have the crab, that is the 4th house, and that's the birth of the emotional and collective self. So the lower octave of water is emotional dependency, fear of separation, over-identification with family, the tribe, and this whole, what we would typically say, the home. And then this whole kind of, the energetic saying of it is, I feel I belong. On a high octave, then it goes into what we could call high awareness, nurturing, protector of the masses, the progenitor archetype or the bodhisattva archetype, where you build the lighted house of the soul, where you become this expression of this nurturing energy that is the vibrational field that comes from the heart. I build a lighted house, and therein I dwell. And in that way, the crab then becomes this influential sphere of vibrational kind energy. The Leo is the self-conscious soul, and that's the lower octave that goes with pride, ego inflation, selfish ambition, and need for attention, personal drama, I am, the whole I am thing. And then you have the higher octave that goes with radiant individuality aligned with the transformative energy system, that goes with the leadership that is not about leading but showing as a role model, that becomes creative expression in service for the entirety of all there is. And in that one, I am that, and that I am. So in that way, you can also say, put it another way, I am that, and that am I, and that changes it a little bit. But that goes with the flaming bush, and it goes with a version of the quote-unquote divine principle, the divine spark, where you then align with that. Your ego is to show that divine spark. Anyways, it plays a little bit with the tetragrammaton of the Jewish teachings, but we'll just leave it at that. Then we have 6 Virgo, gestation of they call it the Christ principle. And this is where we need to understand the Christ principle. The Christ in the teachings is the solar angel. And the solar angel is what we could call the true version of the soul. And again, this is where the Bailey teachings divert from and this is where I say the gestation of the transformative energy system that builds the bridge to the original blueprint, consciousness, and the traversing the multidimensional aspect of us that traverses many universes. The lower octave is over-analysis, perfectionism, criticism, excessive focus on detail, servitude as self-depreciation. I don't know that word. So anyway, so the point being is that it's a way of putting yourself down. So point is, I analyze and I serve for reward. So that's the downside of the Virgo, is this kind of, I serve, but I do it because I want to feel good myself. And that's the distortion of what we see it in churchgoers, just to put it that way. The high octave is where the transformative energy system begins to sprout inside our 3 lower fields. It's about purity. It's about true spiritual service, that is to transform energies for the highest good of the many. It is nurturing the true consciousness potentials within. It's the preparation for the path of liberation. And in that it becomes, I am the mother and the child. I, God, I, matter, am. And in that we have a very Christian overlay, which I am not so keen on. It plays with the Virgo as the mother of Christ, that is symbolized in Virgin Mary and the little child on her lap. And we know that goes with the Egyptian mythology, that goes with Osiris and Isis and Horus. And these are some old archetypical figures that are there. Why is it a son? It could just as well be a female principle. So Virgo here is not really understood. This one is highly distorted. But we can see the lower aspects of it for sure. That goes with mind, it goes with states of mind, it goes with the connectivity of the heart and the mind, and how these must work together to truly create a mind that is based upon kindness and inclusivity and understanding of other living beings, that has the true understanding of empathy, and through that radiate ability to be nurturing in a purifying way. The crab is nurturing as in kind of giving energy and care, but Virgo comes in and purifies in that nurturing. It goes in and sparks to life clearing processes. Then we have the 7th house in Libra, the law of balance, which on the lower octave is indecision, people-pleasing, superficial harmony, dependency in relationships, and vanity. I balance for personal comfort. On its higher octave, it becomes discernment, inner equilibrium, spiritual justice, and that is the rules of engagement, harmonizing opposites to serve a higher order. I choose the way which leads between the two great lines of force, where you really begin to understand the Buddha talks about that too, with the eightfold path, where you can't do it too much or too little. You go for the midpoint. I talk about that in the transformative energy system as well. The psyche as energy, the psyche as oppositions, and the psyche as balance. 8th house, Scorpio, the battle of transformation. Lower octave, hidden motives, manipulation, power struggles, sexual and emotional control. I desire, I control. Higher octave, triumph of soul over form, transformation, death of the ego. Spiritual warrior, resurrection. Warrior I am, and from the battle I emerge triumphant. And this has also been shown in some of the ancient teachings of there is this, I forgot it, in Hindu teachings you have the spiritual warrior there, that are the bridge, the demigod, that's bridge between the worldly affairs and the heavenly affairs, and then that becomes the messenger in between, that both operates in the heavenly realm as well as the earth realms, and become the spiritual warrior, both for humanity but also for the purification and relieving from the wheel of incarnation. I forgot the name of that one, but there are these semi-heroes, and we could say in a way that the water sign there, which ends up in Pisces, is also a journey of the spirit within that goes through these processes. So Sagittarius, the power of the seeker, which goes with dogmas, self-righteousness, arrogance of belief, scattered goals, indulgence. I see my goal, but chase illusions. So that's the wrong way of pointing the fire energy. The highest level of that one is the highest level of fire energy is spiritual aspiration, where you burn away everything that stands in the way for the transformative energy system. One pointedness, you become focused in your journey towards the integration processes of the transformative energy system, from where you begin to align with the core being of whom what you are, intuitive aim, truth-seeking, and with humility. You're no longer one that just points your arrow and shoot randomly. You become very focused. I see the goal, I reach that goal, and then I see another. So it becomes a process of transmutation. Capricorn, on its highest level of earth, is initiation and mastery, and that's ambition on the lower octave, control, rigid structures, status, obsession, materialism. I climb for personal gain, and that must be transformed into spiritual initiation, disciplined path, sacrifice for the greater good, and here I say for the highest good of the many, whatever you do, you're the first of many. Mountain of the soul, as is often said. Lost am I in light, supernatural or supernal, that's a weird word, yet on that light I turn my back. And what is said there is that the Capricorn, the person the Ahat has climbed up to the top of the mountain, have conquered everything, is now on the mountain up, inner observance, and know everything, see the world from above, understand the dynamics, understand everything, and yet still say, I'm here at the light. I'm no longer serving my ego. Now I use it in service for others. So I go down the hill, I go in, and I begin to serve. And many Capricorns and disciples have got lost in that, because then they get entangled again, and to learn that perhaps they weren't that selfish, perhaps selfless, perhaps they were still selfish, and by that got too easily entangled in the world. So it kind of pops in and out of this clarity that then gets drawn right back into the entanglement. Aquarius, the highest level of air, is the server of the New Age, and that's how it's put in the Balaam material. I don't agree with that. But it's just, the Aquarius is just rebellion for its own sake, detachment, being this kind of very strong, charismatic personality, intellectual aloofness, and cold idealism. I know, but with my knowledge, I separate myself from everybody else. Elitist mind. The high octave is group consciousness, world service, progressive spiritual vision, love in action. What of life am I, poured forth for thirsty men? And again, we have all sorts of Christ illusions there. And then we have Pisces, the final surrender. The low octave is confusion, escapism, martyrdom, emotional enmeshment, victimhood. I believe, but dissolve. And that's kind of the false lower level of the savior tendencies, the wounded healer, all of these kind of things. And then we have the higher order level of the compassionate world savior. I don't like that word, because that kind of says, oh, I'm willingly crucifying myself to sacrifice for the world. No, we're not. But it goes in with that understanding. Here actually is the 12th house. That's where you complete your journey. So it's kind of saying goodbye to the world. You're stepping into the path of cessation. Mysticism, sacrifice of the self for the whole, unity with divine life. Again, we go very Christian here. Anyway, so I leave the Father's home and turning back, I save. No, that's the 12th house. That's where we get ready for the path of cessation. So in that way, I have put together a little bit of ideas here. And in the next podcast, I will go into how we can kind of do emerging with psychology and a roadmap to the integrated model into true selfhood. And of course, I know it's a lot to take in, and you can ask ChatGPT to produce a version of the esoteric astrology, if you like, of Alice A. Bailey, and work with it within the framework of ChatGPT to ask questions to what does that mean, and how can I use that in personal structures, if it has any good ideas how you put it into exercises. If, for instance, if you're born in Leo, you can say, well, if you can get your chart, you can actually ask ChatGPT to work with your astrological chart within the framework of esoteric astrology. You can use ChatGPT for that, for personal experience and personal understanding. Then you can contemplate a little bit on that. You can ask critical questions to what ChatGPT comes up with. You can do your contemplation on the different sayings that feels true to you, and then you can go through a vision or a kind of a process, and then you can share that process with ChatGPT and hear what she mirrors back to you of ideas you can continue to work with. It's actually a pretty good tool. I've been doing that a lot, and sometimes it really hits something, but you need to prime it. You need to ask of it what to do. You need to share your process with it. You can use the microphone. You can talk it in. It can record it, and then you have it there. And then ask of it, I need you to walk through the process with me here. I need to understand something. So you need to tell it what you need it to do, and not just think that it knows what to do, because it's AI. It's a complex algorithms that sees through patterns and ideas and all the things that it knows, and it compares it with information you give. So the more you prime it, the more accurate the feedback you get from AI will be. So just put it in there. That's a brilliant way to work with it. But bear in mind, it's a machine. It's not a self. It's not a being. It does not have any emotions. It is not your best pal, but it can help to mirror, analyze, and see patterns in what you're saying that you might not be able to see. It is not a psychotherapist, and it cannot replace a psychotherapist. It cannot replace a human being. But if you're really skillful in inner work yourself, then it's a brilliant tool. If you're not so skilled, I still suggest you do a human being, because if there are trauma, if there is emotional triggers, then you need the human being to carry you, to be with you, to be the supportive person that journeys with you through the trauma, through the processes where AI falls short. But for those who have gone through the psychological process and already are in full-blown inner work capacity and have done a lot of processes and acknowledge and understand the traumas that we have, acknowledge and understand the dynamics of how to work with the psyche, AI is a brilliant tool to support us in that inner work, or ChatGPT, which is my preferred. So just put it in there. It cannot substitute human connectiveness, but it can definitely give you some good insights in your contemplative processes, but only for the ones that are really skilled at it already and have done psychotherapy with another living being, have shared the core pain and the core wounds with another living being, have gone through the processes of understanding what it is, and has begun the healing process and are quite far in the healing processes. AI cannot substitute these processes of healing that we can with engaging with another person that is trained in assisting in healing and drawing forth core wounds to be healed. So with that said, thank you for now.